Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from Anthony's Customs, and for this review we are taking a look at the SH Figuarts Bruce Lee. Now you guys probably remember that I reviewed the Figma Bruce Lee not that long ago, and it left a little to be desired. That figure was pretty horrible, and so the hope was that this figure would be better, and it is. It is significantly better than the Figma. The Figma was trash. This is a good figure. Now that's not to say that this is a perfect figure. There are some problems still, and we'll go over those as we talk about the figure. But right off the bat, I'm going to tell you this one is way better. The Figma looked like it was made by Daredevil with his ears closed. It was just not good. This one is much better. And it has better accessories, better basically everything. So let's get him off the stand. Oh, by the way, the package has a silver background in it, so you can see me a little bit. Anyway, let's get him off the stand and take a look at him up close. All right, so this guy stands roughly, and you can see I have his legs apart just a little bit. It's not going to really change his height too much. He stands just about 14 centimeters tall, which makes him right around 5.5 inches. So a lot of people are saying that's really too short. Oh, it's really not. I mean, he wasn't particularly tall, and this is a Figuarts figure. It's not Marvel Legends or DC or whatever. It's not a 6-inch scale figure. It's smaller, and he's still 5.5 inches tall. So I think he's more than tall enough. I don't think that's a valid complaint that some people are having. The one complaint that I've heard unanimously pretty much is the skin tone, and that it's off, and it's not perfect. I have to agree. The skin is slightly strangely colored. The main color in some places has kind of a grayish tone to it, and then the shading is kind of pinkish, so it looks a little bit odd. It's definitely not enough to where I would call it a problem, but it's something to be aware of. It's not a great skin tone, it's not the best paint job, and the sculpt itself does look a little bit soft in some places. Now this is going to sound weird, but kind of like the Figuarts Hulk, his nipples are kind of weirdly shaped. I don't know how to describe it or how to say it. You guys can see for yourself. Maybe it doesn't look as bad on camera, but in person it has kind of this weird look to it. I don't know how to describe it any better than that. But again, it's a very minor issue, so that's about it. There's a couple little things here and there that we'll talk about, but otherwise, this figure is darn good. You can see the sculpt on the face is particularly nice. It looks really good, and they used their new printing type of technology. I don't really want to get into the technical aspects of it, but things are not painted individually. It's kind of like a dot matrix thing that's laid over top, and how that works is, or why that works, is because it's all uniform. We don't have to worry about googly eyes or details or anything like that. As you can see, we have there's a little bit of pinkness around his eyes. There's nice detail throughout the eyes. There's different tones throughout the face. You can even see some stubble around his mouth, and the mouth itself is detailed very nicely. The one downside to that printing process, and we've seen this before, I just haven't really talked about it. The downside is it's a dot matrix, so there are technically lots of tiny dots. So if you zoom in really tight with a camera, you can see them. The naked eye, it's really not very noticeable at all. So I consider this to be a good alternative to a standard paint job for the most part. So that's very good. So let's set the figure aside for a minute and look at the accessories. The first is the standard face, which you just saw. We have 3 other faces, and they just swap onto the body, as you might expect. So we have this face right here, which is kind of like a cautious face or concerned face. Still very well sculpted and well detailed. Then we have this face, which is hard to hang on to. This face is kind of like a mid-fight, looking off to the side kind of face. Still, you can see very nice musculature, very nice sculpt work, very nice paint work. Looks great. And then we have this face, which is the "Who just ate the last piece of pizza" face. And I think a lot of people might recognize this, but it's an iconic look for him that he's made that face before. So don't think it's just, they got a little crazy with the sculpt. It's actually pretty accurate, so that's good. So we have 4 faces in total. You saw that he had fist hands on him already. That's pretty standard. We also get these hands, which are kind of relaxed hands, good for martial arts poses. Then we get these hands, which are fairly iconic for specific poses. Style poses, we could call them, if they weren't specific for a particular pose. And then we get these hands, which are also kind of, I mean, basically everything in this pack is iconic, but they're useful in many ways. So you can use your creativity for that. And then we get these hands, which have holes drilled through them, essentially, so that he can hold his accessories, which I'll show you in a second. We have one last hand, which could be a thumb up, or it could be a flick his nose type of hand. Whatever you want to use that for, you can do that. And now for the accessories for him, we have the nunchucks, or nunchaku, if you want to call them that. And they have the steel chain. It still seems like the chain's a bit long, I guess. Maybe it's not. I don't know for sure. It's not as long as the Figma version, but it seems maybe a bit long, but that's not a big deal. It's not noticeably bad. We get 2 short sticks, or eskrima, or whatever. They call them cudgels, I believe, in the instruction booklet, but you can call them whatever you want. We have 2 short sticks, and we have one, if I can pick it up, one long stick. Now, these don't have any detail on them at all, so I'm not going to zoom in or anything. It's just a plain black stick. So definitely a nice batch of accessories. We have some alternate faces, hands, and everything you need to pose this guy and make him look cool. So now the important part. I mentioned the sculpt a little bit being soft, and it's only in some places. It's not a big deal. You can still see some vein work in the arms, and it's nicely done. There's nice musculature, nice anatomy. As far as having a shirtless human being that looks realistic, I don't think you can do too much better with the articulation. This is pretty much where it's at, where you want to have it, and it's so much better than the Figma. Anybody that said the Figma was good, if they're a reviewer, you should stop watching them, because it was not good. Objectively, hands down, not a good figure. This one is. It looks very, very nice. So in terms of the sculpt, we do have one other issue, and that is the way they did this it's not really a floating crotch piece. It's connected to the kind of skeleton inside. It does look a little strange being baggier than the strap that's supposed to be on the top over the pants. So that's a little bit of a strange choice. They did that though for the articulation, so I get that. And once you pose him, it won't be an issue. It's just something to note that it does look a little odd sometimes, but it's not a big deal. All right, so let's go through the articulation. The head, I can show you specifically, is on a double ball peg. You can see the inside of that joint right there, and then obviously it's down in the neck as well, and the neck itself is on the same type of joint. I think it's only a single ball peg for the neck, though. Let's put his face back on, I guess. Might as well have him look like a human. We have for the shoulder a nice butterfly joint that works pretty well. If you're familiar with Marvel Legends, it's a little reminiscent of the McFarlane Spider-Man. The way it's engineered to fit kind of seamlessly into that socket. It works really nicely. I like it. I think it's a very nicely executed joint. Now, I thought it was going to have that vertical joint also, and there's a little bit of play in it, but I'm not sure that's intentional. So I'm not going to go on record in saying that there's any vertical movement in the butterfly itself. We do have a ball peg that connects the arm to the butterfly that lets the arm move all the way around. We have our standard ball hinge. It's a little limited. We can't get the arms out too far, and it's kind of strange because it looks like they should be able to go farther, but they can't. It would have been nice to get those out there, but it's not a huge deal because it's still fairly far out there. We have our bicep swivel. It works just like a standard bicep swivel. Double jointed elbow, which sometimes is good and sometimes is not. Like right now, you can see only the bottom part worked, and it's a little strange looking, but it's not terrible. If you want to, you can bring the other joint forward and then move the bottom part, and that's a little bit better, and it gives you better range of motion, so that's what I would recommend you do. It just doesn't usually want to go on its own. You're going to have to manually go in there and push that bottom part forward, but it's okay. Now, the wrist is one issue that I'm not real happy with. I like the fact that they have the straight peg in there. It's still super tiny, but it's not likely to break if you're careful because there's not a huge amount of force on it, either connecting or removing the hands, so that's good. And that gives us our ball peg to connect the hands on there. Full rotation, that's all fine. The problem is the way the ball socket is set up is it's kind of off center. So you often have gaps at the wrist on the outside of the hand, and it throws off the alignment. And that's true on both sides. It's not a huge problem, but it's something to note that the hands don't ever quite go seamlessly into the wrist except for on the inside of the palm. So it looks good like that, but on this side it doesn't look quite as good. Minor issue, but it's worth noting. For the torso, I'm not entirely sure what's going on in here. I want to say it's a double ball peg, but I didn't take it apart to check. But here's the motion. It can lean fairly far forward. You know, we have a really nice ab crunch. You can kind of get some gapping back here if you really force it, but it's nothing to worry about because I really had to force it. And then you can lean him pretty far back, and again, at the very maximum you get a little bit of gapping, but if you don't go quite as far, you'll be just fine. And he can lean side to side on that and rotate on that a little bit as well. Now, I would recommend you do most of your rotation at the waist because it works really well, and he has a whole lot of leaning at that, which is just a single ball peg connected to the solid skeleton of his hips. Now, these hips are kind of like the Awakening Goku in that they don't have a hinged ball peg. They just have this hinge here that lets them go out. So it's not the best design ever. Once you get imposed, it won't look too bad, but it's not great, and it doesn't have the best range of motion, but it's still pretty good. And then this whole assembly rotates forward. And the outer part of the pants up here in the crotch area, they are soft, or it is soft, so you can get the legs up there pretty far and you won't really have too much of an issue. Now, again, it could be better, but it's not bad, so that's okay. You have a little bit of a thigh swivel in there also, though if you rotate it too far, obviously you can see inside. For the knees, it's not bad. It's not the worst we've ever seen. It's not the best we've ever seen. I think it's an acceptable compromise. We have that hinge there. Technically, the parts can rotate around on that a little bit, but you're not going to really gain anything from that. But you do get good range of motion out of the knee, and it's not horrible looking. It's a lot like the Darth Maul knee from the Star Wars figure, if you're familiar with him. And then lastly, we have the feet. The ankles are just basically a ball peg. They have a decent range of motion, so that's pretty good. You can get a nice ankle rocker out of it. Not a whole lot, but enough. They don't go too far forward, and that's a little disappointing, but it's not too bad. And they go fairly far back. And we get a toe joint. So you should be able to pose him fairly well. I'm not too worried about it. I think it's kind of good. The feet do seem a little bit large to me, but maybe that's just me and it's not a big deal. So all in all, it's a really solid figure. I'm very happy with it. You know, a few minor issues here and there, but that's normal for a figure, obviously. So I definitely recommend it. If you were considering a Bruce Lee figure and you weren't sure which one to get, you should be sure because the Figma sucks and this figure is really good. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you can see my upcoming figure reviews, custom figures, and other good stuff. And in the meantime, keep collecting.